The piano
Oh, I know.
than knitting. I never did succeed. I don't think I ever contributed to the war effort that way.
Oh,
But we all contributed, believe me,
oh,
and
I'm sure.
I can remember standing in line at McCready's store with my stamp books. I still have a stamp book someplace.
We've had a couple donated.
Hmm. I know that, or I would have tried to find mine and give it to you.
Yeah, it had to be certainly a difficult time for everybody.
Well, it was,
Tell me
but
about, now you were just listening to the radio to get news of the war.
yes.
And did you have a daily paper?
No, with the Bay City Times, everybody took it. And I think we took the Detroit Free Press, too, as I recall.
Daily?
Yes.
Yeah. That was.
And the Roscommon Herald, of course, did its part.
Yeah.
She just dearly loved Lorna Doones.
Okay. Oh, yes. Well,
Yeah,
we're
here.
having a little snack here. Oh, we have to get back to business. Here we go. Okay, we're going to back up a little bit to the 4 teaching years that you had. So that was 39 to 43,
No,
37 to 41.
yes.
Okay. Okay, do you remember what your salary was?
Somehow, I can't remember what I started with. Somehow, I bought a car very inexpensively through a friend before I came up here because my father was living alone in Clinton. And the bus service, the train service was not in that direction. The bus service was not very good. I wanted to be able to get to my father in a hurry if anything happened that I needed to, which nothing ever did. But I wanted to visit him and help him when I could. So I bought a car, a 37 Ford, and
So you bought a new car.
no, then it couldn't have been because, no, I did not. It was a 36 Ford, so it was pretty new, two-door. I think I got $1,000 the first year, and somehow, or maybe it was 1,100, somehow I paid for that car. I saved enough to pay for that car. And
How much would the car cost?
probably $500 or $600. Then I think I was getting $1,200 my last year. That would have been 41.
Great. Very good.
As we said, I would like very much to be able to compare the value right down to the cent of the dollar
Right.
now and then, because I sometimes wonder if they say, well, everything was so cheap then, but we didn't earn very much money.
Yeah.
So it just depends on how far it went and what it could
Do you
buy.
remember how long your school day was? And did you have a free period, like a preparation period like there is now?
Oh, I had a study hall. This Mary Ellen Eddy and I were hired. She was the home ec teacher. She didn't have as many classes to teach as I had, of course, with home ec. So she taught, it was either 5th or 6th grade. I never can quite remember. I think 5th grade, all except 2 periods. And I taught music all day, except I would go in and teach English and geography, I think it was, while she taught home ec.
To these 5th graders.
Correct. So that's the way we worked that out, so that they could manage to have a home ec teacher and a music teacher and not spend too much money.
How many people were on the school board at that time?
I think 5.
Yeah.
And Stuart Rutledge was, as I remember, president at that time. Signe Soderholm was on this, as I said, told you earlier on, this darling blonde who came into the school often in jodhpurs, and probably she rode out on the farm, you know. She was on the board, and I can't remember who else.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, let's talk about more recent, later years. Let's jump ahead to the Arts Council and that wonderful group, and how you had all these people coming from all over the world to Little Roscommon, Michigan.
Well, that was quite a thrill. There was really, I have always felt, a great deal of natural talent in Roscommon. And we were privileged to have, after I did what I did in the music in the schools, and I don't think I made a very great mark, except perhaps with, but we did a lot of very fine chorus work. Glee Club, we called it then, and started, and I was, as I said, proud that I was privileged to start the band. Then we had some very fine, starting with Gil Stansel, some fine band directors, and think of our wonderful Jim Mahoney, you know, and the great young man that we have now, and Larry Summericks, and we were very privileged with good instruction. One of the things that Roscommon has to its credit is, which has helped us, is this wonderful country we live in here. And it's drawn a lot of people who are very talented and who also want to be in the North Woods like I did.
But also interested in education.
Yes, and good musicians and so forth. And that's the way we have gotten many of our doctors, our good doctors, through the years, as they have multiplied. Of course, when I came here, it was only Dr. Marzoka, and Dr. Hammond was an OD, and very highly respected. And Dr. Ballard was our dentist.
Who delivered your voice?
I went to Grayling, and it was Dr. Klippert. He was in with Keyport, Klippert and Keyport. Were very prominent in Grayling. But I decided not to have, and it was a good thing because both my boys were premature. And it was a good thing we were in the hospital environment. Though it was much different than now, believe me.
I'm sure.
We didn't get them home for 7 or 8 weeks and did not get to touch them as they do now.
Yeah.
We just could look through a little square window into the, it was a very difficult time.
Oh, I bet.
But they survived and did very well. And of course, John lost his life in an accident in 1978, our younger son, our wonderful John. So, where are we now?
Well, we're trying to get to how we happened to the Arts Council.
Oh yes, we're going down. In the latter part of the 60s, about 68, I think, we started a community chorus and a community orchestra under Jim Mahoney. He had the orchestra for a while. A wonderful young man who, Gippert.
Carl.
Yes, Carl Gippert had it in 69, I think, and did a beautiful job, and we'd give concerts. In the summer of 1970, now Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp was started in 1966, and in the summer of 1970, a man who had worked with bringing groups from Europe to Blue Lake, but who was no longer connected with Blue Lake, called me and asked me if I would sponsor a choir from Newcastle upon Tyne in England. Well, I was having a busy summer with the rentals and motor business. I wasn't too anxious to do it, but he persisted so, and I thought, I must not give up this opportunity. And I prevailed upon the orchestra members to be a committee to work with this and work out the hosting. This was we presented them in the gymnasium, which has the stage in where the craft center is now. And to back up a little bit, I presented all my programs in that beautiful little gym that's in that old part. The stage, which is blocked off now, was a corridor, so that when I rehearsed the plays or my Christmas programs or any kind of programs, I had to rehearse in the corridor, and when the classes passed, then we'd have to stop, so let them through the corridor. But the sides opened up into the corridors there so that we could really pack them in. And I'll tell you, at Christmas time, everybody in Roscommon County came, well, not for the Houghton Lake area, but I mean from our Gary Higgins school district. And every child from kindergarten through 12 was presented in the Christmas programs.
Wow.
One year I got tired of the Christmas programs that I was ordering, so I wrote a play, and that went over very well.
Fine.
So, back to the Arts Council. We had to have some kind of a name to go by. We had called the orchestra, the Roscommon Chamber Orchestra, so we conceived the idea of calling ourselves the Roscommon Chamber Music Society. And I had a very good friend who was a fine musician from Royal Oak, Gwen Krupp, who helped me get some other things worked up, so that summer when we had that choir from England, we presented about 2 weeks of a kind of a festival, and called it an arts festival. And that summer, the year previous, the PTA had had an art show. So I thought this would be great to incorporate in that. And Sue Glover was either the first one in charge of that or the second one. It might have been another artist who was married to a teacher here. I can't quickly say her name. Anyway, and I should back up to the fact that many people had been interested in trying to start an art council here. And while we were still, this is while we were still running the Roscommon Hotel. I can't remember what year, but I remember having a gathering there of people who were interested, so that when I could put something on with the, as a present with the Roscommon Chamber Music Society, we had a nucleus of a very fine committee. Now, one of the things that brought educated people into this area was when the conservation department started having so many different things in the Roscommon County, and in Roscommon.
When the regional office opened?
Yes. Now, when I came here, Carol, and I think this is very important, the Forest Fire Experiment Station was one of the leading in the country. Gil Stewart went all over the West even, and into Canada, giving lectures on the wonderful experiments they had done to fight fires. Have you got something about? But this is what I wanted to say. The forest.
The Department of Conservation Region 2 headquarters were opened in 37 in Roscommon.
Yes, and the year I came.
Yeah.
When I came, the regional office was here. The district office was here. The Forest Fire Experiment Station was known almost all over the United States for the things they innovated to fight fires. We had the largest nursery planted by what we call conservation men out at, the Conservation Training School in the United States. In other words, Roscommon was a nucleus of conservation, which later became the DNR. And I think that's another important thing in our history.
Oh, yeah.
And this brought a lot of people who were interested in education and music to the area. Not that we were always what I termed a very sophisticated town for the type of background that the people had, because there were so many resorters too, and so many people from the cities. And the people here caught on to education and, as I say, a certain amount of sophistication, and developed their backgrounds. And I've always felt that the students that I had were very bright, very talented. And when they didn't have much background, when I first came here, away from Roscommon, but they caught on fast. When we went up to Petoskey, 50 years, which was in 1938, I think, because 1988, the basketball team got up to the state finals, remember? And it had happened in 1938, 50 years before, which was very interesting. When I went with the basketball teams, because I was very good friends of the coach's wife, I remember particularly to Petoskey when they were on their way up. And a lot of those kids had never been out of Roscommon before, till they got the privilege of going with the basketball teams. Because it was one of the poorest counties in the state when I came up here. But they were good, bright, hardworking, intelligent, innovative. They made a great thing one year about Cheney out here and built a whole system of organization and government for it. And it wasn't just a ghost town then. They printed a paper, these kids did.
Did they?
In about 1938. And Ivor Price was supposed to be the president, and she accepted. I can't remember whether I had an office, but they did wonderful things to educate and to entertain themselves. They were very ingenious, very bright. And the kids I had in the junior plays did a beautiful job. And many of the families are still around here whose students I knew and loved. Okay, that's up to the... so then we had this little art festival that
70.
summer of 70. We were very much recognized by the Michigan Council for the Arts, which then was very prominent and doing a lot for art around the state. They were very interested in us because in this rather remote area up in the North Woods, we had started a successful arts council. And when new ones up farther north and in the bigger cities would get started, they would cite us for them to get in contact with, for reference and for what we had done to get going. And then the second summer, I think, Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp had well established their international program. This is the way we got so many of the foreign groups almost every summer, I think.
Oh,
We had one from Blue Lake Fine Arts
well,
Camp.
wonderful.
And one summer, to show how hard we worked, we had, I think, 108 of the Blue Lake students in our area at one time, because we had an orchestra which was in the 90s in membership, personnel, plus we took care of 8 or 10 people from Germany who wanted to come over here and spend a couple of weeks and were sponsored by Blue Lake. And the people responded. I'll tell you, we always placed everybody in families.
Yeah, I remember all your notices in the paper that you'd be looking for homestays for the performers.
Then when the outreach programs came in the state of Michigan, I contacted, in fact, we had a committee meeting out at Sarah Oppie's and entertained the man from Meadowbrook Theater, Bollinger, who is going to, be the tour director. And we got Meadowbrook Theater we had up here for quite a few years. Hans Lance was very cooperative, and Ed Harkins. We put things on in the high school, and in the out at the college. We had Midland Symphony a number of years under, and his name's will come, and were almost signed up for contract to the Detroit Symphony one summer.
Really?
And I went to Florida, and when I came back it had fallen through. It was the year of the centennial, and the 100th year for Roscommon. So we knew we could probably put across what it would cost. $5,000, I think, which was a lot for then. But they somehow got mixed up on their commitments. And then I called the manager whom we had worked with, and he promised us anything we wanted during the coming year in the way of size of orchestra or whatever. But we were afraid we couldn't do it in the winter time.
Oh, yeah, that would.
But we did many wonderful things.
How many summers did you have these international groups coming?
About 20, almost every one of the 20 summers we were in operation. With the Arts Council, then we changed the name officially when we became legal to Roscommon Chamber Music Society Arts Council. Oh. And we then we took our art show down to the park, Wallace Park.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
Yes, and that was a wonderful setting. But when we first did it, we didn't even have a staircase. We produced The Man of La Mancha out at Kirtland College under Tony Nebel. She came to me and said, "Mary, I want to put this on, but the college isn't able to back it. Could the Arts Council do it?" And I said, "Sure, we'll give it a whirl." So, as I said, I had a good, strong committee, and we produced it out there and did a marvelous job. And it was just, even with the amateur players, it was just a thing of magic. It came off beautifully, and Tony was a wonderful directress.
Yeah, she was.
And so then we changed our name to Roscommon Chamber Music Society Arts Council, which is a mouthful. We asked the Michigan Council for the Arts if we should do something else and change it. They said, "No, you're known over all this part of the state with that long name, so keep on." And just add Arts Council. So then we often abbreviated RCMS, Arts Council. Mm-hmm.
So is that still in existence then?
No, in 1990 we began to, as many organizations do, it all falling on certain people. In the meantime, though, I can't stress enough all the wonderful things that went on musically and with the talented students
yes,
here.
that is
I mean, aside from the Arts Council, I'm talking about through the school, other peoples and productions, did beautiful jobs with development of things in the village of Roscommon and the environs. And so all these things were going on, and the college had taken off more by then, and we're doing series. And a lot of people speak of the Arts Council as being one of the catalysts of what transpired, but I still want to stress about all the things that also were going on in the community during the time of the Arts Council too.
Right.
That we were doing, just certain people were doing all the work. Some of us were getting older. Woody had died in 1990, and I didn't have as much heart for it.
Mm-hmm.
And we just decided that it was time that we quit.
Mm-hmm.
And all those wonderful people had worked so hard. I would name some of the great names of people who helped. Of course, Gil and Deb Stewart were big help, and it was Gil who had so much to do with the college and the auditoriums named for him. And they're both gone. I'm afraid if I get into the names of people that I remember so much, I'd leave someone out, because once, one of the last things we had at the Catholic Church, and I gave a little talk about what we had done, you know, and how I was so grateful. And I left out my beloved Julie Borick.
Oh, did you?
And Julie is one who, I can say this on the tape, all because everybody knows, keeps a low profile.
Right.
But she is such a hard worker in so many areas. And that made me sick, so I'm not going to mention any names. But it was a good, strong committee, believe me.
Well, it was a big part of the community, like you say,
Mm-hmm.
of what went on.
Mm-hmm.
And that art in the park, my family's, we won't say whatever the name is now, we still call it art in the park.
Yes, I notice many people do.
Oh, yeah.
But I guess it's better the way it is. But I look at it with pride, because I look at the band, as I say, because I was privileged to start that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I look at the art fair, and I think that it was that first, you know, when the Roscommon Chamber Music Society sponsored,
Mm-hmm.
because the PTA the year before had done one,
Mm-hmm.
and it was very nicely done under Vidal. And then in '70 they were not going to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, how nice to put this into our roster of
Sure.
events.
Okay, let's touch a little bit about your church affiliation and your organ playing and all that at the church. Have you always been a member of the Congregational Church since you came here?
Yes, and well, I didn't really attend very much the first time in my life. That I didn't attend church very much because the church was kind of at a low ebb. That was the time I should have been. But I came in '37 and attended some during that year.
Mm-hmm.
They asked me in the fall of '38 if I would try to get the choir going again. They had had a choir, but not recently. And so I started the choir up, and I really think that the choir kind of rejuvenated the church. Francis Hodges played for me some, and I played some and directed from the piano. And finally, in 1949, I think it was, Flemrich gave us the Hammond organ. And then Sarah Oppie played quite a bit. But I directed the choir for about 25 years until we went to Miami and played some and whatever.
Who?
then
Again, it's
and then we went to Miami. So I asked Helen Rutledge, who was kind of a protege of mine, and I helped get her started in music and and going into it because I could see she was so talented. She was a piano student, and I encouraged the family, to have her take voice privately, and then she went on
Did you
into a
give
music
private
career.
lessons in your home?
Yes, I did until 82, I think it was, or long in there.
Did you learn to play the organ at college already, or did you learn it?
No, unfortunately, I didn't because I could not afford to take organ lessons either as a matter of time or money when I was a public school music major and piano minor. It's always been a regret to me because...
But you play the organ.
Yes, and I studied pipe organ the year I was a freshman in high school in Florida. We couldn't get a piano teacher, so I studied pipe organ that winter. And then I started playing for church in Clinton when I was 13.
Wow.
And went to the University of Michigan my last 3 years in high school and had piano lessons there. Wish I'd worked organ in then. So, but when we got the Hammond organ, didn't have a full keyboard for the foot pedals. So there wasn't much object in learning the regulation foot pedals. But in 1979, I think it was, we got our new Baldwin. So by then, I had gotten Carol Resnich to substitute when I went to Florida, and then we became kind of alternate organists. This had a full AGO regulation pedal keyboard, and we studied for 2 or 3 years with Sandy Aiken out at Houghton Lake.
Oh.
And that was my best shot at learning to play. It's the foot pedals that is difficult for a pianist who hasn't learned it when they're in college. But that was a regret of my life that I didn't get. But later...
Well, but you're doing fine with it now.
Later, I was again privileged to go to Spain with Marilyn Mason, who is the great organ teacher and has been for about 50 years at the University of Michigan, head of the organ department. And I went to Spain with her and a group of organists, and we got to play in all the major cathedrals in Spain because she has played all over the world in the major cathedrals and has an inn. And she coached us too, so this was a great thing.
When did you do that?
I did that in, see that, it must have been 56 or so.
Oh, when you still had young family.
No, I don't mean 56, I mean 96. 96, that's more like it.
Oh, okay.
And because I didn't try to do things like that while Woody was alive, because I tried to gear what music I did with my music, and Woody was very understanding of it, but I tried to gear our activities together around what he wanted to do. But also I went with Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp International Youth Symphony Orchestra as accompanist and pianist to Europe, for 2 summers in 92 and 93.
Oh, okay, that was 10 years ago.
And that was a marvelous experience. And Fritz, my cousin, was the director of the orchestra.
Pretty nice. Pretty nice. Well, music is your life. Look at this beautiful piano sitting here.
And I studied 2 summers with Marguerite, my cousin Marguerite, who was married to Gil, Fritz's mother. Her father was a very fine musician in Wisconsin, composer, and conducted the Green Bay Symphony and Appleton Symphony and taught at Lawrence Conservatory, where Sarah Oppe's son has made quite a name for himself in composing. And That's in Appleton. And I went. He had a summer music camp on the Door Peninsula, on a little peninsula called Idlewild, off the Door.
Oh, really?
Yeah, wonderful place to go. And I studied 2 summers with him over there, and he was a wonderful pianist.
Wow.
And this,
No wonder you're so good.
I don't know if I'm that
I
good,
know you are.
but I just feel that my music has been such a privilege. And one of the things I would like to say was that when Dr. Farman came up here, it was when Gil Stansel was here with their library of music that Marguerite had inherited from her father. And he was deceased then in '48. And Dr. Farman came to play with us in ensemble. We had, I played piano, and Gil had taught himself he was a trumpet player, but he taught himself all of the stringed instruments.
Oh.
And we had music for celeste and harmonium and trios, for cello and violin and piano. And Dr. Farman was invited to come and play with us, Aaron, and he didn't really want to do it. He was afraid that we, up in the North Woods, it wouldn't be too spiffy. And he came the night before he was to leave in a couple of days, and we played till about 2 or 3 in the morning. And then the next night he came and we did the same thing. And he could never get over. And then there were many others, Margaret Gilbert, who was part of our group, and Esther Dressback and Jean Yorty. And then I'd find people out at Pinewoods and people who summered here. And we had a wonderful group of people. Sometimes we'd get together and play all day long, different combinations of strings and piano. And
music that you can play, great. Make it
right?
musical.
Mm-hmm. But he never got over bragging about how wonderful he found this group of people who could play.
Up in the North Woods.
Yeah. One time I went with him to the Detroit Symphony, and he said he sat in they always had their seats in the 5th row, and he was a very close friend of Misha Mishikov's, who was the concertmeister of the Detroit Symphony. And when he would come in before the orchestra, as the concertmeister does, he would wave to them, and of course I was included. In fact, we were entertained at Mishikov's home one Thanksgiving with Farman's, and wonderful musical time and so much talent there. So this particular time we were there, he said, I want to introduce you to somebody who sat a little farther back this was when they were at, where were they first played? It's Orchestra Hall now, I think, but the first place that the Detroit Symphony played. And so we went back up to this elderly woman, and Aaron said, I can't remember her name, but he said, Mary, I want you to meet Mrs. Music of Detroit. And he said to her, I want you to meet Mrs. Music of the North Country.
Oh, great. Well, that was nice.
Which didn't have any more meaning than that he happened to do it, but it was a kind of a proud moment.
Why, sure.
Yeah.
Why, sure. Well, your music was just is so much of your life. It's wonderful. And how you shared it and brought it to the community.
Well, it has brought me many wonderful times, plus many wonderful friends,
Yeah, that's what
Carol.
it was. That's what it was.
And I lost quite a few of those friends last year,
Yeah,
you know.
I know.
The
Hard
MacTells
work.
were so outstanding and so close.
Yeah.
Margaret Gilbert, she started it off.
Yeah.
Aaron Farman's wife died, and we were very, very close last summer. But she died last summer.
Yeah.
And Esther Dressback, who played with us, died during the winter before.
Nothing stays the same, does it?
Nothing stays the same,
No.
but the memories always
They're
stay.
still there, yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about this little blue water out here. Things have changed since you came here. You don't have a dock anymore, but you still have a dock.
Yes.
And
We have a motorboat and a pontoon.
oh. And are you a swimmer?
Yes.
Oh.
I don't swim much anymore. You know why? People who come here, Carol, ask me if Higgins Lake is very cold if they haven't been here before.
Oh.
And I say, it's pretty cold and it gets colder every year. And they look at me and they kind of question, how can that be?
Uh-huh. Because it's getting warmer, it's polluted.
Well, isn't that polluted? But the thing is that as the years come on, the water feels colder.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've had a nice, you have a good life here at Higgins Lake, I'd say. I also want to ask you a little bit about all the wonderful antiques that you have, because so many are from your family.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about the vintage clothing that you have, just as a off. I mean, you don't have to.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have several wedding garments. One of them was my great Aunt Hannah Dusenberry's.
What was her lifespan?
Well, she wore her wedding dress in 1800.
In the year 1800?
Mm-hmm.
So
And I have
born
some
1780.
and I told you about my grandmother's wedding veil.
Right.
And she was married in 1848, and I wore it in 1941. I have a wedding vest that was worn, I guess in the 60s, 1860s. But I have a couple of trunkfuls of old clothing which Carol Garlow has promised to help me take care of from my attic, and we've got to do those things.
And what years, most of that clothing is from what era?
Well, the middle of the 19th century.
Okay. And you came to it from your mother or your father's?
My father's
father's
side.
family.
They were great savers of things, and my dad loved wood. He loved many different things which he collected, never to buy and sell. He wasn't that kind of collector. He just bought things when he was in the railway mail service, when he'd go into Chicago. He bought Indian artifacts because he was very interested in them. Mm-hmm. And he bought, but most of the furniture has been in our family for several generations. I have some from my mother's side, some from Woody's family. Mm-hmm. I have chairs that belong to, I understood, to Mother Loughry's, Woody's mother, grandmother. Mm-hmm. So that goes back pretty far.
Right. And the table you donated to the Historical Society?
Well, we like to think that.
Might be from the halfway.
Right. Yes.
Well, is there anything else, Mary, you can think of that we should add to your lifespan in the Roscommon area? Higgins Lake and Roscommon, I think we've covered it quite well.
Probably too well.
Well,
Too much.
I don't know. Music is your life, really. And we have covered it well, I think.
And I shall have to say that my mother and father, my dad was, were whom encouraged me and sacrificed to help me to get my education in music and to have the best. And then I was a very good student, but they did not offer scholarships. I never heard of a scholarship till I went to college, and one of my housemates who lived in Detroit had gotten one scholarship.
Oh.
So we had the only alternative was to borrow or work. And
You worked during college?
yes, I think I worked 4 hours a day all through college.
Wow.
And plus practicing piano, which was always time consuming,
Sure.
and taking
Sure.
mostly a full course.
Now, because I assume that your parents had not gone to college.
My dad, as he always said, my mother, I'll start with her, she went to normal school.
Oh.
That's where they learned to become teachers. And she might have done that when she was in high school or 18, because I don't think she graduated from high school. And she was born in a log cabin in central Ohio, where they slept upstairs in the wintertime. The snow came in through the cracks. And I think it still stands there. When I go back, I see it. Dad's family was a little, perhaps more affluent, and although they had people in Mother's family became very well educated, you know, the generations of mine and after us and so forth, and were prominent lawyers in Ohio, some of them. But Mother taught school.
Oh.
And then I would like to tell you this of my mother. She lived in Marion, Ohio. She grew up on a farm near Marion. Marion is where Harding lived, and the memorial to him is there. She had a very good friend who was the secretary of his in the Marion Daily Star paper. And Mother, which now I think of as being very enterprising when women were not in business. She was in business with the wife of a cousin of Mrs. Harding's, Mrs. Kling. Florence Harding's maiden name was Kling. And this woman was married to Mrs. Harding's, Mrs. President Harding's cousin. They had an insurance business right downtown in Marion, Ohio. And I have still her card that's printed Kling and Allen. And it was because of that that my father went to Marion, Ohio to settle an estate. And the insurance was held in my mother's office. And he went into the office to take care of it, and they met and fell in love and were married.
Her last name was Allen?
Yes.
Well, isn't that nice?
And much of this mahogany furniture that I have came from that estate.
Oh, that he was taking care of?
Yeah.
Well,
that he bought out of the estate when he couldn't sell it.
That was an important estate.
But as I said about my dad, he loved to collect things, but never on a commercial basis. He never put any value on them. What he was interested in, because it was beautiful wood, he loved stands, he loved old clocks, and he loved the Indian artifacts that I have.
What did he do the 15 years he was here?
He helped Woody a great deal in the hotels.
Oh.
And he'd look after the maintenance men and boss them around and see that they did what they should and get tools together for Woody. And he was kind of a right-hand man to Woody. And Dad was the easiest person in the world to get along with, except maybe Woody Loughray. So they got along beautifully for 15 years while he was in our home. And the boys, fortunately, were able to remember him because he was very witty, very philosophical, very wise, and many people in town remember him still.
Sure.
He died in '56.
What was his first name again?
Scoville.
Oh, yeah, Scoville Walker.
And they called him Scove. And he was a Mason and a member of the Eastern Star.
Oh, how nice.
And he was a very fine speaker. And he was very, he'd speak at some of the big doings we'd have, when we'd entertain the grand chapter. And I always felt a little embarrassed because he was very clever at speaking a short time and saying quite a bit in a witty manner while he spoke, and he'd kind of bring down the house.
Oh, that's neat.
It was kind of, then the grand officers would sometimes speak a little too long, and oh, you get the picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long have you been an Eastern Star?
Since I was 18,
No kidding.
which will soon be 70 years.
Yeah. Wow. Good for you.
I'm a past matron and past Ada and organist for many years.
Fine young lady. You
Oh.
are. You are. Well, I think we're pretty well set. We're going to come to the end of our tape, too.
I think so.
Think we've covered most everything? If you're thinking of something else, we can add to it. Okay?
Not now, I don't.
Okay.
I think we've covered quite a lot of ground. I hope it's the right.
I think so. We got a little taste of all the things in Roscommon moving around, and mostly the music.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the main thing. Okay, we thank you, Mary.